Good morning, and welcome to our second general session. Reminder, for those of you who are official delegates of the NCPERS National Committee will take place from 2:45 to 3:30 p.m. in this room. States will caucus during this time and elect their 2 National Committee members. The Tuesday welcome address is presented by Comptroller of New York City, Scott Stringer. Comptroller Stringer has spent his career in public service fighting to ensure that every New Yorker has an equal opportunity to make it in New York City. As an investment advisor to custodian, trustee of the city's 5 pension funds, Mr. Stringer and his staff oversee the city's $160 billion pension system. Please welcome Comptroller Scott Stringer.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Stringer, New York City Comptroller. For those of you who are not from New York City, we ask you after this conference to spend as much money in our city as you can. We need the tax revenues, so I hope you will do that. And I also want to thank Dale Chase and recognize Mel Aronson, the trustee extraordinaire from New York City. Give them a round of applause. And Hank Kim, the CIO of the County of San Diego, who invited me to be here today. And I also want to do a special shout out to the trustees who are here from teachers and fire and from our amazing New York City retirement system, which is the 4th largest in the country and 14th largest in the world. Would you give the New Yorkers a big round of applause? Thank you. Now, conferences like this are so important because the financial industry doesn't change itself. It changes because people like you here today make it change. Some of you probably followed last week's U.S. Senate primary in West Virginia. Someone named Dale Blankenship was on the ballot. His name might be familiar to some of you because 8 years ago last month, a tragic explosion killed 29 coal miners in West Virginia. The mine owner, Macy Energy, had paid record fines for both worker safety and environmental violations in the years leading up to the explosion. Even before the tragedy, investors were concerned that Macy's board, led by a wild chairman and CEO named Don Blankenship, was asleep at the switch. After the explosion, Macy's share price plummeted by half. Now, at the time, I was Manhattan Borough President and a trustee of the New York City Employee Retirement System. NICERS joined with public pension funds from around the country. We challenged the board and we forced leadership and governance changes. Blankenship was forced out, and the company was sold in a deal that restored value for investors. The Massey tragedy shows how poor environmental, social, and governance practices can destroy share owner value and even take workers' lives. It also shows how investors, like all of you, can hold bad actors accountable and force flawed companies to change. Now, when I was elected comptroller 3 years later, we realized we needed to work with allied pension funds to ask how we could maintain our fiduciary responsibilities while gaining more accountability from companies. We started the Boardroom Accountability Project. It enables us as share owners to nominate board of directors on the company ballot. When we know that most board elections have been coronations. Sitting members too often nominate their friends from the country club, folks who went to the same schools, wear the same suits, they think the same way. It's a recipe for groupthink. And what we know, many of us in this room, we know that it's in fact diverse perspectives that actually matter at the board level. So when we started the campaign in 2014, only 6 companies had real proxy access bylaws. Only 6 in the whole country. They weren't listening to the share owners. So throughout this campaign, we actually organized public pension funds around the country, from California all the way to New York. And through the work going company by company, we went from 6, and I'm proud to tell you today, we have now got 500 companies that allow the right to run independent directors so we can hold boards accountable. And that's a victory for everyone in this room and everyone who worked in that campaign. This has never been done before. 65% of the S&P 500 allow for proxy access. And again, I want to stress the work of the institutional investors, investors today, the people who took the risk to make the campaign work. We now have a real voice all over this country. Now, proxy access is a type of project that you, as owners, can still undertake. You can leverage your own voice, use your own power to protect your investments, because you own parts of these companies and they have a right to have a voice in what they're running and what you're running. It's a partnership. So we want to continue this forward progress, even with great uncertainty in Washington. We know that the economic opportunities lie in our discussion about what happens in corporate America. We need to make sure that we promote the kind of diversity at the board level that allows us to have informed decisions. When you have young people of different backgrounds who start at the bottom and work their way up, they take that elevator, they start working up to the 5th floor, the 10th floor of a company. For some people, that elevator gets stuck, mostly women and people of color. The lack of diversity on our corporate boards is not sustainable, it's not right, it's not smart. And we are now holding companies accountable for their data so that we can push for the kind of diversity that will not only set a marker for what is the next civil rights struggle, but I believe it will make companies run better, understand that diversity is not a negative, it's a strength. Today, S&P 500 companies, women hold only 22% of board seats. African Americans hold 7% of director positions. For Latinos, it's 2%. So we clearly need action. Diversity isn't a box just to be checked. It's a strategy for economic success. Choosing between what's right and financially smart is a false choice here. Companies that embrace diversity in all forms, from top to bottom, they don't just shatter glass ceilings or close pay gaps and encourage equality. They perform better for investors. And that means this is also a financial imperative. We know that if government won't hold companies accountable, then we can. Collective investor action, company by company engagement, and more important, the coalition that we built around boardroom accountability can now take the next step forward and really create change in this century and the next. We've got to avoid cases like Macy Energy. We can't have that anymore in this country where workers are suffering. It's not right. And we can do two things very well. We can protect our investments, we can strengthen companies, and we can also make sure that we do the right thing. Many of you here have been part of this struggle for a very long time. And I know so many of you are fiduciaries that continue to think these issues through your very special lens. I've learned as controller that there's nothing more important or valuable than being a fiduciary of a pension fund that protects the retirement security for firefighters and police officers who every day they wake up, they're never sure they're coming home. To protect the retirement security for the teachers that are absolutely shaping the minds and futures of all of our children and grandchildren. For the people who make city government work what they expect and what they deserve at the end of the day, is a sound retirement. That's the work that we do. And we do that with our investors and our companies. And I argue today that so much of what we have to do is get away from this thinking or this lack of understanding that groupthink is not the answer. Smart strategy, diverse thinking, taking issues and seeing how far we can break the glass ceiling, all through the lens of better and bigger returns, is what I believe this conference is about. And I believe this is the future of the economy of America. And certainly, we need to look at our corporate partners to figure out a way to get to the places we have to be. So I wish you a great opportunity today to this great conference with all of you. You happen to be in the greatest city in the world. Pension returns are up. I take full credit for it. No. I actually credit our Chief Investment Officer, Scott Evans, who's here with us. Let's give him a round of applause. He makes those investments. You're going to hear from him later. And again, I thank you for being in New York City and listening to what I have to say. Have a great conference. Thank you.